Hi everyone, let's get started with the first section of today, which is based on sustainability for Indian SaaS startups. And of course, we have the two pioneers in India, Zoho and Kaleyra, that led this revolution. So you don't really need an introduction for Zoho. They started the SaaS revolution in India. They have been the largest SaaS company that is sustainable, that is bootstrapped. And from Zoho, we have Rajendran Dandapani. Rajendran has been a very crucial member, yeah, and he's been part of the founding team since Advent days. That's and uh, and also from Kaleyra we have Aniket Jain, and Aniket is the CRO of Kaleyra.
Right.
Uh, Thank you for being here, guys. So we would actually like to hear about your journey from you. So Rajendran, it's how did you guys start Zoho? How did the journey start?
Okay, so when you tell the story changes. Let's all understand that first. So in the telling, the story has changed in the past 25 years. If you really go back to 1997, 98 and find out how it really started, it might actually be different. But today, the way we see it, the important things, the milestones, the important moments, the paradigm shifting thoughts that stand out are the ones like Sridhar and his younger brother going to a mall, trying to purchase dress for a weekend event, and seeing made in China, made in Vietnam, made in Pakistan, made in Mexico, but no made in India. So when there was a little patriotic fervor there, what can we do? What can we be proud of putting our name on some made in India product? And they were electronics engineers eking out a living in Qualcomm at that time. And they thought, why not build something in software? So they tried building telecom software. They had some connections in IIT, and we got together. I was employee number 7, and we started building software. And we realized probably, I don't know if it is genetic, but the environment, the people, the talent availability, and the general interest at that time, late 90s, was in building software companies towards the projects mindset. We wanted to build, but for somebody else. So that is the second decision we took. We said we will not build it for somebody else. We'll build it for ourselves, put our name on it, make it intellectual property created in India, made in India, made for the world. So these were two very important moments as far as I am concerned of becoming a software company. And then over time, we kept our eyes open, our ears always on the ground, and trying to understand what the market shaking tsunamis were. So when the telecom bust was coming, we already knew that it was going to come, and we pivoted. And then there was the second dot-com bust. We already knew something was coming there, and there was this very nice moment where Web 2.0 was being talked about a lot. And just a while before that, a large team that we were working on a project in Europe got benched. So instead of the typical layoff of that time, we said, how can we repurpose this group and do something in the Web 2.0 sphere? Instead of making it Web 2.0 for the individual, an ability to create something from the for the individual on a web page, we wondered, can we build collaborative productivity tools for the enterprise, for a person working in a company? So that was the third most important moment in Zoho's lifetime, where we thought from building software for routers and printer management, we suddenly moved to building software for each and every person online. So it's a pretty colorful story. And the most important thing that one takes away is there is no plan. Seriously, there is no serious business plan printed in triplicate and bound. It's just all about agility and your ability to listen to the customer, keep your costs and expenses low, and being able to look back at your own past and say, it's okay, that was a screw up, that was a mistake. What next? So that would be our story.
That's a really interesting story, Rajendra. Thank you. Aniket, in your case, you started Kalera right out of college, and you went. You hit 30 million 8 years later after that. I'm sure you also would have faced similar situations where you had to take very critical decisions. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, so let me before that, before the key decision, let me tell you a little bit story about Kalera, right?
Sure.
Solutions Infini, which was formerly known as, now it's known as Kalera, was started back in 2009. Both of us, me and Ashish, Ashish is the founder, was after the Web 2.0 journey. There was an outburst, right? After that burst happened, we were one of the early adopters of coding on PHP and MySQL, and we built a small application in college called College Management System, wherein we built the entire SaaS software. On top of it, we were connecting to a GSM modem and sending messages to the customer, and sending messages to parents, students, saying your marks card and so details and all of that. And that's where really Kalera started back then. But what happened is that we realized that we were actually very similar to Zoho's story, but Zoho is an inspiration for us. Really, I mean, we are not even there. We're just at a very early stage. Kalera could not sustain that business model where we tried to sell that software. And what we did is we started building software for others. And we realized in India for the last early 2 years, we invested a lot of time in India. We realized that Indian software adoption as in service model was not very equipped, right? And unless in US you get paid by the hour and stuff like that, it was very new in India to really get it. It was more like a fixed model. And then we realized that we were in the wrong business model. We were not even breaking even between that model. We pivoted to messaging service in 2011. So that's how the journey started. Both of us from college background, come from a business background. Ashish is a techie. I'm a business. Completely complementing skill set. That's how we started. Some of the key decisions, right? I mean, let me tell you that one of the key decisions at a very early stage we took is to own the value chain. What we realized is that most often in business we get into more like a trader, where we buy from somebody and sell from somebody. But very early on, we were lucky enough to figure that to solve real customer problem. Now it's not about making more money. Typically, a trader would say, "Let me manufacture things on my own, and why don't I will make more money." But our approach to this whole problem was very different, saying, let me solve customer problem. Now to solve customer problem, I need to own the value chain. And we started owning the telecom piece. So we went to the telecom operators directly, procured network infra from them, on top of it built and started selling. So what happened is we had more control, we had more flexibility to operate. One of the key decision maker in a very early stage, I think that was a turning point, I would say, for Kalera to really take it to a next level, because we had the ability, and then that gave us confidence as an organization to talk to customers, to pitch, because we started telling them, hey, look, we own the value chain. So when we own the end to end, it's more easier and we have more confidence to sell the product.
Right.
And that was one of the key decision making at Kalera.
Got it. So we had a very detailed walkthrough about the decisions, but let's talk about the mistakes that might affect sustainability. So Raj, what do you think that should not be done that could affect your road to sustainability?
Let me start by saying some mistakes are inevitable and some mistakes are probably important to make. It's all about the scope of the mistake and the time you spend making those mistakes and how little time you spend learning from it. Those are the things that differentiate the also rans from the great. It's not as if they don't make mistakes. It is that they make them fast. They make them at very low budget, and they learn from it. I think it was Elon Musk who called it excellent mistakes. An excellent mistake is something where the eventual benefit you get from that mistake actually far outweighs the loss that you actually incurred originally when you made the mistake. So let me get that very clear. Please make some mistakes. Just ensure they are excellent ones. But beyond that, if you want to look at the common mistakes we all make is, I would say, probably trying to grow too fast. Even human physiology, you would notice that taking a steroidal boost will give you quick growth and spurts, but it's going to affect you in the long run. So organic growth is always preferred than trying to take in an artificial boost, probably too much too soon. So that is something I would very strongly advise against. The second thing is about the most often spoken refrain of where is the talent? Where is all the talent? Oh, I need to set it up in this city, in this costly environment, because this is where the talent is. This is the next Silicon Valley. This is where the hip crowd comes, and this is the only place I can be in because all the other people in my domain have set up offices here. So I think we need to break out of that. There is enough talent out there to go around, and all that needs is the right leadership and the perfect crucible, the environment filled with freedom and responsibility, in which if you place them, they will bloom, they will surprise you. So I think that's another mistake that many of us make. The third thing I would say is the Start with Why by Simon Sinek. I don't think many of us get the why part right. So what we do is fine, how we do it is great, but why do we do what we do is not defined well enough. So too many of us pursue quick money, too many of us pursue fame, and too many of us seem to think the conventional, traditional employment model is not for me, so I am cut out to be an entrepreneur. So these are all the wrongest reasons to strike out and start up. So getting the why right is very important. And talking about the why, I think it was Clayton Christensen, who talked about the Theseus paradox. It seems Theseus set out with a ship, and then after his great conquests, he came back and he anchored his ship in the harbor, and in his honor, the ship was there for a very long time. And as small pieces fell away from the hull, they were replaced by new planks of wood. And eventually, there was no piece of wood that was in the original ship. Is it still Theseus's ship? Is the question he asks. So many times, like our Aniket pointed out about owning the value chain, many times we kind of sell the soul of the company in our quest to optimize. It happened with Dell. Dell tried thin and agile manufacturing and gave away all their secrets. And here came an Asus company from Taiwan, which said, I won't just manufacture for Dell, I will manufacture against Dell. Because the soul of the company was already sold. So do not give away your why. Identify your why and do not give it away too soon. It should be close to you, held close to you. That is the reason for your existence as a company.
Got it. Thank you, Rajendran. Speaking of the company's mission, Aniket, I would like to understand more from you on what you think about acquisitions nowadays. So Kaleyra, we recently went through a merger, subsequently went IPO. So what was the thought process behind that?
Look, so both of us, me and Ashish, when we started this company, we never thought we will actually be a $30 million company, right? And we never also, we never knew what is really SaaS and, tools like this, right? And I think being unaware and sort of helped us in some way, right? Very, no baggage of work experience, straight out of college, started this company. So what I really think is one of the dreams, as any other young kid would have, like, okay, I want to be one day a very famous, a sports person, or I'm going to be an astronaut. Like that, we had one when we started this company. One of the dream was whatever we do in life, we want to take this company to IPO. Okay, so that was like a dream, and it was more like a vision, right? And obviously you have to be at the same time be a little more grounded and see more realistic goals, right? That while having that as a vision, but over the years, in the last few years, what we've done is we kept short-term goals with a long-term view in mind, and started achieving those short-term goals. And then you sort of you open the Pandora's box, right? You keep so let's say I remember the first milestone that we had was a $1 million revenue per year. How do we get to that, right? And there was like a plan. We went did modeling around it. How do we achieve that number to make sure that we reach 1 million? And then from 1 to 3, 3 to 10, 10 to 20 and 30, how do we really take that, right? And through that journey, and we spent like 7-8 years, and then we realized that, look, I think, and then you talk about right time, right place, and we met a very opportunistic company in Milan who wanted to sort of expand into multiple markets. One of the things we realized that after achieving 30 million, 25 million ARR, we realized that if you want to take this company to IPO, especially in India, it's a more challenging environment. Environment looks very challenging today. It's very difficult. It takes easily about 3, 4, 5 years. And the only what made sense was to collaborate and see if we could do it together. And when we met this company, in both, it's very hard, right? I mean, it's like a moment where both companies are talking like, hey, we want to take this company to IPO. And that's how this merge really became very successful. And this merge was more towards strategic. It's not always about acquisition. It's about how do you sort of blend in your strategy. And so today we are still, part of Kaleyra as an entire organization. Both of us, me and Ashish, play a global role at Kaleyra today. And that is something was a turning point in our career, where in 2018 we said, okay, let's merge and see if we can create the story in 1 year rather than wasting 5 more years in taking this company to IPO. So very organic, very slow growth in first 8 years, and then jump from 2018 to 2009, we became a public company at New York Stock Exchange. So so that's been the strategy and thought process behind acquisition.
Got it. Thank you, Aniket. So when we speak about sustainable growth, there is also a problem of cash flow in place. So how do you think bootstrap companies can compete against their cash-rich counterparts, Rajendran? Because branding and growth nowadays has been very essential in capturing the market.
So am I going to be the one answering first every time, or will you be doing a pause round?
It's actually a question for the both of you. So
let me actually again let me question the question before getting in. We are not in the game of competing against. Let's understand that. We actually, just last night we had a partner conference, a global partner conference, where we went out there and said how well we were working with our competitors, because eventually the value had to be passed on to the customer. And no single company can really provide everything that every customer needs. So you need to find ways to work openly, share responsibly with the other companies, so that there can be a holistic value addition to the end user. So let's understand that we are not competing against. I already told you about how it is a myth that we are finding talent hard to acquire, talent hard to get. All the good guys are being recruited away by that company which is ready to pay 2x. So if you get into the game of paying extra to lure somebody away from somebody else, that's not going to work long term, because it's a spiral up to an unsustainable ceiling. There is no ceiling. That's the problem. 2x can become 3x, 3x can become 10x, until it becomes a bloated ego, and that person gets into depression. So first of all, talent acquisition should not be a race. It should be aligned towards your value. If a person understands your ethics in business, understands your long-term goals, Sridhar, for example, in the global partner, Sridhar, my CEO, in the global partner summit, for 45 minutes, he gave his keynote. For 30 minutes, it was about the company, its culture, and its long-term vision about transnational localism, how he wanted to work in the villages and do something to the society around it. I was wondering, what will a similar company, a partner listening in from Mexico or Japan or Switzerland think about this? Will they be able to relate? But the point is, we only want those people who can relate to work with us. That's the same logic that we apply for acquiring talent.
Mm-hmm.
Create a true north, be unshakably adherent to it, and go with the people who come with you. Or if you want to use college slang that Sridhar uses often, dance with the girl who is ready to dance with you. Yeah, don't go hunting. Don't go hunting. That's the point he says. The other thing is, if you want to really compete with cash-rich counterparts, like you put it, um,
Mm-hmm.
I think there are a lot of opportunities on the table that are probably too big, too small for these big companies to even consider. So we often talk about business being a fractal puzzle. What I mean by fractal is if you keep zooming in, it doesn't lose interestingness, it only gets more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So he says the interesting aspects of any problem is in the edges.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have a problem about, for example, COVID, and if there is another problem about protein folding, what is the overlap? Is there a protein folding solution that we can use to immediately resolve this COVID problem? That overlap, if you keep zooming in, you will see more and more overlaps of smaller and smaller things. And the big companies cannot come there. It is like a lion trying to hunt a mouse and the mouse getting through a crack. The lion can't follow. The lion can't follow. Walmart cannot compete against Go Frugal Technologies. It's another company that Sridhar's younger brother started. Walmart wouldn't even be bothered because the game is different. But there is enough to do in the edges. There is so much to do. That's the second way I would say bootstrapped companies can actually compete. And I would also say breadth is important because today it's the game of consolidation. People want to acquire more and more solutions from fewer and fewer sellers. They don't want to pay 7, 8 different subscriptions, even if it is SaaS. They don't want to juggle 6 or 7 logins. They want a single sign-on. And with GDPR and data awareness in the end user, we are concerned about not just your compliance, but about the compliance of the companies that you are vendors for, or the compliance of the companies that are vending stuff to you. So it's better to trust one person deeply and for a long time. So do not try to be a narrow solution provider in one very narrow domain. Expand and become broader is another way we could actually compete with cash-rich counterparts.
Got it. Got it. So Aniket, my next question for you is that how has bootstrapping changed in the last 10 years? Has it become more difficult, or please share your views regarding that? I could think of the expression from your face that you have a complex answer coming up.
Yeah. So yesterday night I was thinking, is it bootstrapping? Yesterday I was thinking about this question, and really, is it easy or difficult, right? And first I thought it's difficult, but then I realized that what. So fundamentally, right, back in 2009, the awareness about entrepreneurship, awareness about bootstrapping, funding, all those was very, very low, right? And there were no co-working space. There were not a lot of community support to entrepreneurship in 2009. What I realized is that there's a lot of that today. There's a lot of energy. There's a lot of community support, especially companies like you guys, who come in out, who work, collaborate with people, give opportunity to small bootstrap organizations to come and talk about their product, their capability. So I believe that it's a good time to be a bootstrapping organization. It's a great time right now. The reason is there's a lot more aware. When 2009, when I started, it was just a Flipkart and bunch of other companies in Koramangala, one of the IT hubs in Bangalore, right? And there's a lot more awareness. There's a lot more support from the community that enables you to become bootstrapped. And I strongly believe that anybody who wants to, who wants to start a business can actually start with a small money and get a lot of free support, right? There's a lot of freebies available, right? Today, there's the accelerators, there are these communities, co-working, they're ready to give you like space, come and operate, and a lot of and And also now I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs today are doing so much to the aspiring entrepreneurs to come and actually be part of it without anything getting in return, right? No, with no expectations. And that's been a great positive change in the last 10 years that I've seen. And back in the day, it was all about saying what's in it for me, what's my equity, all of that, right? And now there's so much awareness, so much context, so much topics. You have like a history of documents, you have research material available, and that helps. I think bootstrap. I think it's a good time to start and being bootstrapped. Yeah, I think that's yeah, go ahead.
So very similar thoughts. I actually I'll ask you this question: who was the first person to climb Mount Everest? It's a trick question. It is not Edmund Hillary. We don't really know.
Yeah.
Because the first person to climb Mount Everest wouldn't have taken a camera along, would have done it by himself or herself, and would have died an unsung death, probably on the way back or on the way there or after settling down 10 years later. So when companies started out 25 years ago, there was no company. There was nobody along. We just ran an individual race. We didn't know what to learn. We didn't know somebody telling us. We didn't have a Sridhar Vembu to tell us, hey, these are the mistakes you have to be careful about. These are the things you need to be aware of. So compare that with how people have started avoiding Shimla during summer. Because it's just not worth it, there is too much crowd there. So we are somewhere in between these two, where you are running a lonesome race versus it's the road is crowded. There are too many cars on the highway. So that's where we are. It's harder to find niches also. What are you in? Once upon a time, being in software meant you were starting up, right? Today, even being in a hyper-local, narrow vertical, they ask, okay, what do you do there? So that is going to expect a little more thinking on the part of the founder, right? So that's why I said finding the why and really pinning that down is going to be really, really important. Yeah. Thanks.
Got it. Thank you, Rajendran. So Aniket, the next question is specifically for you. So there are a lot of first-time founders coming up in Chennai and Bangalore. So they're just straight out of college, and they have like a couple of years of experience, and they are starting up. So I want to hear your version of. It sounded really similar to your story since you started up right out of college. So I wanted to hear your version of what would your advice be to your younger self, say to a 25-year Aniket.
Interesting. So definitely, I completely agree, right? What Rajendran ji said about slow process and slow growth, and organic and build business. One of the early advices that what I want to give is people stay invested for at least 8-10 years, right? If you want to build business bootstrapped, if you want to build any business which is a funded business, you'll need to stay along. You need to to at least have that minimum 8 to 10 years of time, and then you realize what you want to do after that, right? Your early stages are very crucial. You need to be like literally jack of all trades. You need to like entire end to end. You need to own what you need to do. Your sales, you need to know product. You need to do everything literally to ensure that you know what you're trying to build, and that becomes an easy. You become an enabler in the future, and you obviously will hire people and manage all of that. Go after money if you need money when you really need it. Don't go for money for branding, for visibility. Bootstrapping business is very I would say it's kind of funny because sometimes what I've seen is success means funding, but a bootstrap founder should always relate himself that it's not about funding. It's about building the right business model, right business approach, product-led growth. I'm sure that there are a lot of examples today in the country where people have build a product-led growth versus just heavily funded, doing a lot of monetization, trying to get more customers. Very. So if you build, if you have the capability of building business on your own, great, and stay focused. Focus on focus on short-term goals. Don't be too optimistic about the market size. People talk about market size, saying even if I get 0.1% of this market, then I will be like $1 billion company. I think that's great, but at the end of the day, you need to be at like literally on the ground. Don't be at 30,000 feet. When you're doing your execution, be on the ground. I think these are some advices that I would give to any founder, startup, aspiring entrepreneur who wants to start companies.
Got it. Thank you, Aniket. And of late, there's one more trend that we see is that founders starting up recently or in the last 5 years, say, they are much concentrated on keeping the company for themselves for a longer period of time. So if there's an opportunity for acquisition, people just go for it. So what I'm trying to say is basically the priority has shifted from from retaining the company for a longer period of time to going after money and short-term goals and acquisitions. So what do you think about acquisitions nowadays? How do you think companies are valued? Rajendra and Aniket, I'd like to hear both of your thoughts on this.
Okay. Should I go?
Yeah, go ahead.
Look, I think the valuations really, right? It's very perspective and perceived very differently to each individual, right? Today, what I've seen is that people, for example, a company that I would view, a SaaS company, would be very different from somebody else viewing. And what I've typically seen is when you build a sustainable business model, typically a cycle that we have seen is a 7 to 10x of a decent average size companies that let me be very straightforward because there's nothing really to hide, right? Of a revenue, and typically about 20x of that valuation. And valuations are very, I know that the valuations are delusional, right? I have seen that a lot of Western influence today is there in the country. Today we talk only in $1 million rather than crores, when you're trying to raise money. So, what I've seen is that very early stage companies, typically even at an idea stage, it's like valued at $1 million, which I think is too high. Right? Personally, I think the valuation should be, when you want to create a value, you need to really put in the right kind of. What I've seen is people just go after blanket money, right? Any blanket investors, anybody random person who's just willing to put those 10K checks, 20K checks, right? But what you have to really look at is, if the person who's going to put that 10, 20K check, what value is going to bring to the table? What really he can do for you whether he really fits the business model or your segment or domain knowledge, right? I think these are some other factors which sometimes founders ignore and okay to just accept money. I think some of these valuations are perceived very differently, and I think hence there's a lot of correction required, which I don't know what do Rajendran has to say.
Yeah. So we are not really into this game. So from an observational academic standpoint, but let's understand one thing. We value the person behind the idea more than the idea itself, because more often than not, the idea is going to change. The idea is going to be cross-pollinated by the other people who come and play a role in it, but it's going to be immediately transformed into something the moment an MVP gets into the market. So how adaptable are they to changing, to doing that pivot? And how COVID ready are they? Come on, how many of us really planned for something like this? And what a tsunami of change has happened in the past couple of months. So agility, and come on, Seth Godin says ideas are dime a dozen. If you have an amazing idea, it is your God-given responsibility to share it with the world, he says. Go out there, put it out. If it's really an amazing idea like you think, probably most people would not adopt it. You will have to shove it down their throat if it's an idea ahead of its time. So come up with an idea. I think it was Peter Thiel who said, what is your secret that nobody else believes? Isn't that what he said? What is one amazing secret that you are so really having an amazing conviction on that nobody else believes to be true? That is the idea that you need to pump forward and towards. Beyond that, uh, looking at evaluation as a number based on an idea, I think that's the wrong thing to do. And that sets the wrong example for everybody else, because most dinner parties and LinkedIn exchanges are about, I was valued at this, what was yours? Vanity metrics, vanity.
Yeah, that's missing.
Thank you, Rajendra. Thank you, Aniket. So we are at the last 5 minutes of our session. And I'd like to end the session with one last question, which relates to the current scenario. We have already experienced a recession before this in 2008. So we would like to actually understand how beneficial or what was the impact on a bootstrap company during the recession, which we can take as learnings for the current recession.
Yeah. So I will share, because I have been through it with Sridhar, watching him in close quarters. So I can really tell you his gut feel and what we went through. First of all, I think it was Warren Buffett who said, it is only when the tide is out, you know who is swimming naked. Because when things are all fine, when the water level is high up, you really don't know who is not wearing anything below you, below your hip. So when there is money flowing, when there's good times everywhere, you don't know which idea is fundamentally flawed. Yeah. So COVID is such an exposure. COVID is such a great leveler. It is showing the world which are the ideas that sustain, which are the ones that really don't have any core value. Yeah. So every recession is really, I would say, a great opportunity. It's an early warning, I would say, before you become too big and implode. It's an early warning. We need to have one every couple of years. It's a wake up call. That's the way I would put it. So I don't know how many of you remember Terminator, the original movie, where in the last scene, there's an amazing last scene where this lady, mother of the hero, Connor, Sarah Connor is her name. She's in a Jeep, an open Jeep, and there's a boy who comes running and says, "Viene una tormenta." I remember that phrase so well. And the boy says, "There is a storm coming." Long before the skies are clouded and it's dark, he says, "Viene una tormenta." There is a storm coming. Every couple of months, Sridhar Vembu makes a post in our intranet forums. He talks about a storm coming. Of course, he didn't predict COVID, but he's a self-fashioned economist. He's almost a doomsday economist for many of us. But what did I miss out following him and adopting his ideas? Probably some amazing bonanza or fortune, but I never missed out on my monthly salary. We have never been, as a company, we have never laid off people in 25 years. We have never taken loans. We have never been in debt. We have never had to give our vendors a delayed payment. So these are values that I hold dear, and they have been possible only because we kept telling there is a storm coming. So Adam Grant, in his book called Originals, many of you might have read the book. I strongly recommend that book. It's about how original thinking is tough to get a commodity these days, and how do you cultivate such a thinking. He talks about how it was a recession, it was a Great Depression that actually laid the foundation of some of the most amazing companies we see today. From Nike to HP to IBM, he traces it back to one particular Great Depression. Probably it was the Vietnam War, probably it was World War II, probably it was a Spanish flu, but very close to that time, somebody came up with an amazing idea that became a long-lasting company. There is some theory, there is some sense to it, he says. And I think it's because you are bootstrapped during these times, you will sleep well. Worrying about what you're going to do with other people's money that you have in your hands is probably the worst sleep killer. I think I don't know how many of you understand Tamil, but I will quote it in Tamil and then give the English translation for it. In the Tamil version of Ramayana, written by Kambar, there is a beautiful phrase that says, "Kadan pattar nenjampol kalanginan ilangai vendan." That is, like Ravana was depressed. Ravana didn't know what to do. Ravana was downcast. How? Like the heart of a person who had taken a loan he couldn't pay back. That was the phrase. Kadan pattar nenjampol kalangina nilangai vendan. That's a beautiful message. And there is a message right there. It's not about chasing your dreams. It's about being able to dream. To be able to dream, you need to be able to sleep well. To be able to sleep well, you have to do it with your own money. Stay within the costs and expenses. Never really celebrate too flashily during good times, so that when the bad time comes, it's not if, it is when. When the bad time comes, there is going to be an equanimity. There is going to be a Zen like stasis to the way you stoically take in the situation and know that good times will come again. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajendran.
Thank you.
I'm afraid we'll have to put a hard stop over here as it is, as the
Sure.
time is up. I wish we had more time, though. This was a really great session, and we
Yeah.
still have a lot more questions to ask you. But anyways, Aniket, Rajendran, thanks a lot for being with us today. We are very much honored to host you, to host sustainable companies in India for the very first conference that is happening just for SaaS. So I hope we can have more sessions in future.